Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I am not Joel Gunn. I am your guest host today, Brent Fessler, and today we are with Mike Morehouse. Mike is a good friend. He is in the mortgage business. He's VP of production at Veterans Lending Group. And if you missed our first episode, go back and check it out. We're going to continue some of those conversations here and some of the big concepts and topics that Mike brought up. Mike, so good to have you with us here today. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Yeah. In the last episode, we talked about the importance of models and frameworks and things. And so I definitely want to get into that. But I also wanted to talk about, you said that the leader today needs to start thinking differently about how they lead because things are changing faster, bigger, differently, more significantly. And I think we understand that, like, if the environment's changed like that, a leader is going to have to adapt to that. But maybe talk to us quickly about some of those things that we should be looking at as leaders that are changing and changing quickly.
I'm trying to think, where do we start?
Do you use like the Pestle framework for that, like politically, economically?
I try to keep it, I guess, probably, like I said, I think I mentioned before, I try to keep it very simple. And when you look
we appreciate that.
Yeah, well, it's about the only way I can think.
I'm pretty sure making things more complex makes me look like a smarter leader.
Yeah,
of course, because that's my goal.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I guess to that end, I think when you look at the things that are changing, probably one of the biggest things is the ability to communicate without friction, and I that, to me, that's one of the big. I mean, there's a big list of things, but as we go out and whoever we are, like I had mentioned before, we all lead at one time or another. But communication without friction sounds like a great idea. It's just we were struggling.
As long as we all agree, that should be fine.
Exactly, and so one of the things is that if you look at the ability to communicate without any friction, and I mean whether it be Slack, Teams, whatever, Zoom. Email. There's no discipline in many organizations about what goes out. Is the message right? So you're as you work in a company, you're being inundated with information, and so I think that's one of the challenges from a leader is how do your people get the right message at the right time to do the right thing. And I'd love to tell you that I have some solution, but it's something I think we're going to struggle with because there's the internal information that you're getting, and that can be somebody from one department just dropping an IM into you or an email that comes in, or it could be external information as you're sitting on your laptop or your computer and you're starting to see things about your industry, and it plants a little seed of concern, whatever it is. So I think the communication without friction is a challenge. I think there's some things that you've got.
Is that a fallacy? Like, should we be expecting to ever get to a place where we can communicate without friction?
I think you want to be able to. When I say without friction, it's just so free flowing.
Okay.
Yeah, from a free flowing perspective, we don't have a shortage.
I thought you meant communication that doesn't rub me the wrong way. So.
Well, no, I've never been able to accomplish that.
Okay. So that kind of friction's always going to be there.
It's always going to be there. But if you think about what happened, I go back to the dark old days. If you wanted to find out financial news, you went down and bought the Wall Street Journal, or you subscribed to it, however you did it, and that was how you got your information. Now it's my Apple Watch is going off, is telling me what the stock market's done or the bond market. Part of the problem is that if you have an organization and you're trying to accomplish something, there's certain things that you want your staff to know, that certain information, and you probably want it to have context. So that I think is a struggle. So if you think about, things are going in, maybe you're doing a great job of it, but all this outside noise is still impacting people. In the mortgage business, obviously interest rates, it's not only a barometer for what the cost of money is, but it was, for the business that we're in is also, it's an emotional barometer, right? Interest rates go up, it impacts your employees, it impacts our customers. So I think not having friction is something that we battle. So I think it's important that internally you find ways of providing clarity or, the truth as your organization sees it. So at minimum,
So that's an interesting phrase, the truth as your organization sees it, right?
Yeah.
Which, as you were talking, I was thinking about the importance of a story.
Exactly.
And so we've got lots of information coming and data points. We don't have stories coming. We have facts or data or numbers or things like that. But I would say one of the important job of a leader is to write a story now that fits those things or the truth as our organization sees it. And maybe they don't do that in a vacuum, which is important.
Yeah.
But a leader's going to now gather things and say, here is our story. And I'm just thinking through now, if the information is coming quickly and I'm not a great story writer or storyteller, I'm going to be disadvantaged as a leader because I'm going to be working with an old story because the information has moved on, or I haven't clearly written a story, or I expect you'll get the story. I'll just throw the facts at you. It's like I'll throw some numbers at you and expect you've been able to draw the same chart I did.
Yeah. I guess really, going back, I think we talked about it before, is somebody has to understand the goal. Okay, where are you going? The story is we're going on a trip, right? So it could be like the hero's journey. We're going somewhere, and the business plan tells you where you're going. Sort of, what's important on the trip. It could be values, it could be your mission statement, those things, code of conduct, how you conduct yourself. It's maybe
building the boat that you're in or the bus that everybody's on.
Absolutely. And so there's you go and you say this is what's important. And this phrase of the vital few things versus the worthwhile many, right? What are absolutes? What are inviolable, codes of behavior, whatever it is. Non-negotiables, and those are
I like to call them core invaluables.
Yeah.
Sometimes instead of just core values.
I like that. And if you think about it, those become our test. Something comes up, information comes up. Oh, it doesn't go with what we're trying to do. It doesn't mean that you ignore it, but being able to have the business plan, let's call it, it's the roadmap, the journey that we're going to go on, is step one. So a leader has to provide that. If you don't, then what you end up doing is you end up convincing yourself that you're agile because you're continually, moving from side to side, and it's not agility. You've now achieved a state of
flapping in the wind is what that is, right?
You've achieved a heightened state of chaos, and so it's that idea of having the plan which guides everybody. And
it strikes me when you have a team that's equipped like that, or if you don't, maybe contrast it. If I have a team, they don't have that lens to test what's going on. The wind has shifted, or something environment has shifted. If I don't have that to define my response to it, generally what I'm going to do is look at what somebody else is doing. So basically, I've lost my identity in that. I don't know who I am, and my response is I'm just going to copy somebody else, whatever they're doing. But I love the depth and the health and the of an organization, as you describe it, as a leader who has equipped the team to understand here's our plan, here's our goals, here's our values, here's who we are. That's the framework that we test and determine what our next step will be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And going back to the individual, everybody wants to be led. We may not admit it, but we're all looking for somebody that we're going to be able to look up to at some point. It may not be continuously, but we want to be able to be led, because when we're in front of people that are good leaders, we improve ourselves. We know it's good. But going back to this idea, we've got all this noise. The truth is an organization sees it. You're providing something that you're always going to be testing against. And if you provide a framework, and that's a term that I use a lot, is a framework for people to make decisions. Now you've given people tools to be the best that they can be. So they know what direction they can go in, where their directed efforts are, what their awareness is all about. And then at that point, as long as they stay within those boundaries, they can, I will say, be the best that they can be. But when you don't have that, there is this, vagueness, like, should I do this? Should I not? This is a really great idea, and you're 3 weeks into it, then somebody comes back and says, what are you doing? So flexible framework is really important. And going back to the noise part, a big part of that is communicating, what we're supposed to be doing every day. And it helps you filter the noise. But if you keep hearing the same noise, you have a concern. Going back to the whole, knowing, understanding, trust, the ability to come up and say, hey, Brent, I keep hearing this. I've got a little bit of concern about it. And you're my boss. I can talk to you and feel comfortable that I've got a trust level that we can talk about it. And it's something that I may need to bring up to you. And the environment's changed. So that doesn't mean that we, the framework gets completely dismantled, but we make an adjustment. And that's how you go through the iteration. And I think most organizations that are doing well, the small decisions that are made at the line level, at manager department levels, have a bigger impact than the big ones that are made up at the top. In my business planning process, I call it direction and momentum. Where are you going? All those things. And then momentum is what you do every day to get it done. And it's communication, after action reports, things like that.
So I'm going to go modify my own business strategic plan and take off that objective to increase vagueness. I think that may not work out well for us.
No, I think there's this balance. Vague is such a horrible word, but I would say creating some tension about solutions. In other words, a little bit of a contradiction where you want to have a plan, but you don't want to have all the answers because creativity gets killed. Good people don't want to work for you. I mean, if I said, hey, Brent, I've got your day mapped out for you minute to minute. This is everything you're going to do. What are you going to do? Well, that's great. And you might find it comfortable for a short time, but that becomes mind-numbing. And that's one of the things I think has changed in
it feels like that's robust, but it's actually fragile, right? Because you're too rigid. You're going to become.
It's like glass, right?
It's like glass.
It's like glass.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And so I think I've thought about this a lot because my natural tendency is to get everything buttoned down in this nice little nice neat package, and I found out that didn't work a long time ago. But it is you want there to be some uncertainty in areas. Don't have all the answers because we're uncertain as a company. We're not sure where the market's going. So how can I be sure what we need to do?
Yeah.
But create that so people in the organization can rise up. And I think that's one of the things. If you don't have trust, they won't. But if you can establish that and you make these distributed, decision-making, problem-solving sort of processes, then all of a sudden you have a very robust organization, still stays within the framework.
Yeah.
Don't go crazy.
It made me think of in the sports space, when you have an athlete who's trying to increase their agility, generally a trainer's going to have them start working on their core. And
that's a great way to put it.
And so I think our businesses are the same. If it's maybe counterintuitive. If we want them to be more agile in a faster changing space, they need to have a strong frame, strong core. And the stronger that is, the more agile they can be. We were talking earlier, and we've talked this in some of our coffee conversations, just as we talk in the coffee place here, because we do work in the same physical space, not in the same company, but we pass each other. And you've told me just some of your own frameworks that you have used in the past. Why don't you share some examples with us? Because theory sounds great.
Yeah.
But as leaders, and you're your frameworks may not work in my company because you've built something for your business model
Yeah.
and your team. So, but share some examples because I think we'll learn from
You know, the way I would describe it is most of them are mental models. I mean, you can go and there's a list. There's a list that I have.
I'm a mental model myself. I'm very handsome mentally.
Yeah.
Not necessarily physically.
Yeah,
but,
I'm mental most of the time.
Yeah, I have a very photogenic memory as well. So,
but the way that I look at the models is if you think about our thought process and you dissect it, I see this, therefore it must be that, right? And that's the way we are as human beings.
Right.
I hear, go back, before we had houses and we're living out in huts, I hear something growling outside. That's not good. So we as human beings are sort of, pattern matchers, and that's part of it. So it doesn't mean that you have to have 2 or 3 mental models, but I think you have to build something that works for your organization. One of them that I ran into is a customer service issue. You're a salesperson, I'm in fulfillment, and you're upset because the customer is unhappy, and you're sitting there and you're going at each other. So one of the simple models was focus on the customer, solve the problem, leave personalities out of it. We're going to do an after action, figure out how we're going to do it differently. And at this one place, we had a really great group of salespeople and ops people, but part of it was bringing them together. So I printed these up, and they were all over an office. It was, I think, a 7,500 square foot office. I had 50 of these. And somebody would be arguing. I'd just point to the wall. I said, do that. And then over time, it became part of them. That's one of them. Probably one of my favorite models is, I don't know if you've ever heard of John Boyd's OODA loop. Is observe, orient, decide, act, and you go over. And that is a great iterative process to be able to use. And going back to the environment's changing, that's one that I cycle through. What's changed, and you test it. And it's called a loop. For those of you that don't know what it is, it's an incredible. I'm not going to call it theory. It's actually in practice. It was developed by John Boyd, a colonel in the Air Force, and it was basically that if you observe, orient, decide, and act faster than your competitors, or in his case, other fighter pilots, then you win. And so, but in that there's this whole understanding of the individual or an organization, which is culture, background. So that becomes part of the orientation side. So being able to bring that out, I mean, we could probably do an hour on the OODA loop. It's one of the things I sort of geek out on. But it's all of these things that could form biases. You become aware of it, and so that's one of them. But it could be anything from Occam's razor to just different ones. And I look at it as sort of a bookshelf. Okay. If I have this issue, I'm going to pull this off. And I used to have to think about it. Now it just becomes part of my thought process.
So that's I think we can miss that as a leader and equipping our people with these models. Mm-hmm. And I think too often, at least in my own experience as a leader, I like to be smart and understand something and maybe make my own model, but I may not share that with my team. And if I'm generally a coach and not the player, it doesn't do a lot of good if the coach is the only one to understand something. The more the players can understand it, they're the ones actually out in the game and passing the ball, making the passes and taking shots and defending and things. And because you could approach it one way. I'm thinking in the sports analogy again. Every time the coach sees how the defense is set up and what the clock is, timeout. Come here, guys. Here's the plan. I want you to go and do this and this. Like, okay, sure, I can do that. And I think we sometimes think like that's our job as a leader is to tell everybody what to do, and it's our job to be the smart ones in there. But if our job is more to be the developer and the cultivator or the communicator and setting up the models, and you're the ones who are the smart ones that are taking what's happening in real life because you're interfacing with the world. You're interfacing with our customers. You're the one who needs to be smart and agile and be the quickest to respond to what's going on out there, because I'm out of touch with what's going on out there as the leader, because I'm way back somewhere else. And especially as we kind of set this up, talking about the speed of change, that there's the reaction time that it takes, when something happens, and for that information to have to go somewhere up the chain and make a decision, we just can't survive anymore.
No, it could be lost opportunity too. It always isn't. It damages the company from a something horrible, but it could be lost opportunity. I think back to the coach, which you mentioned about the coaches. I think the thing that's great about most of the mental models, if you think about them, they are an opportunity for an experiential process with a group, an employee, a peer, however you want to describe it. So something as simple as, I'll use the 4-step. If there's an issue, it's going to be conversational. So Brent, tell me about the customer. What's important to them? Okay, great. All right. So now how are we going to solve it? I think that's the other part, is words are very important. Don't use the you, we. I'm in the we camp.
The royal we.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about it?
What are we going to do? How are we going to solve this?
Sure. Yes.
And if there's a little bit of conflict, you say, okay, this is not going to help us. So let's and you put them back to the customer. It becomes an opportunity to have a conversation. And there's a thing that I always want to focus on, and that is, how can I change the conversation to be productive or positive? Yeah. And it's hard with conflict sometimes, but you want to change the conversation, and that makes a big difference. Even if an employee, and I will use a model of like this 4-step, there's a problem. I'm not going to come and say, Brent, what did you do? Because I know immediately you're going to be defensive. You're going to not think very highly of me. You're going to think I'm a jerk, and you're going to all those things. So what's my goal? What's the end goal in mind? Is to solve the problem. And so you end up using these models to have conversations with that end goal in mind. It takes work, and that's why a lot of people don't do it. But eventually what happens is it gets inculcated into the culture, into the person, and now, 4 months down the road, you realize that you now have this group of people that are practicing it. And the new people that come in, we got to work on them. So it's that iterative process.
Yeah, I think even as an important leader mental model in that is to avoid this kind of a relationship or posture with our people, because our job is not to win with our people. And the way you described it with the we, it really brings us onto the same side, so that we're together in this and looking into this thing together. And we own everything together, and we're coming up with things together. I think these are essential, because we do see, and we have a lot of capacity as humans, but we do need simplification to make decisions and to act, because even just what my eyes see and what my ears are hearing in any given moment, there's so much information, and I need to distill that down into something.
We battle that every day. I look at the amount of information that you get. It's texts. You read the news. Okay, which of the 500 stories am I going to focus on? And then it's little bright shiny objects everywhere. I think that from a leader's perspective, on the we thing, I don't think it's a leader's job to be right. I don't think it's because there's a lot of leaders that were right, but they lost the organization. Going back to being able to align a group of people around a strategy and executing it. In a simple term, I look at it as leader's job is to move people. And how do you do that? And that's it's one of those. How do I move this person from this position to another one? There's a great book. I think I may have talked about it. Is Reading the Room by David Cantor. He was a psychiatrist that dealt with people going through divorce. And he, I'm probably going to not get this as accurate as I need to, but if I look in simple terms, he noticed patterns in the way people spoke. And he developed something called the 4-player model, which there's a mover. That's somebody that says, hey, let's go to lunch. There's the bystander. They just don't say anything. There's the follower who goes, great idea, Brent, let's go. And then there's the opposer that says, I need to, no, guys, no, we got to get more work done. And he's got sort of operating environments and things like that. But what's really important about this is he lays out the structural dynamics of conversations and then how you end up having these interactions. And you can move somebody, like if you're the opposer, I say, Brent, so let's talk about this, so you want to get more work done. What do you want to get accomplished? You come out with X. Say, okay, so if we accomplish that, are you going to be ready to go to lunch? Absolutely. So through a series of questions and answers now, I've moved you from a opposer. At minimum, I want you to be a bystander. But I think what this whole thing points out is the importance of communication and conversation. And I'm going to use the term active is from a leader's perspective. You've got to find a way to do that to whatever level you can have impact and those people can have impact. Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. Although I don't know if I'm the one to ask, so we need to ask our listeners that if that makes sense.
There'll be all kinds of comments in the
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. No,
if that didn't make sense to you, please leave a comment.
What's wrong with that guy?
I was digesting the 4 different people and in the way that you were talking about it, and I think there's multiple ways to move people, some effective and some not so effective. And I'm thinking those 4 different people, there's going to be different approaches to move each of them. And a general model that I've subscribed to is the extrinsic movers are the easiest to grab but the least effective.
Absolutely.
And the intrinsic ones are the most effective and the most powerful, but the hardest ones, or maybe they take a little bit more patience. Because no, we're going to lunch. You don't have to come. Fine. Go do your own thing. Yeah. Right. That's the easy thing. Or like, dude, go to lunch. Right. Raise your voice or something. So talk a little bit more maybe about that and in your experience and in communicating or in the models or anything about the outside versus inside.
Yeah, so going back to the idea of the opposer, and actually when I read this book, and I have to be very honest, the first couple of chapters I had to whip out the dictionary because there's some words in there I didn't understand. It was a little tough. But when I sat and I digested it, what ended up happening was that I ended up looking at it and going, oh my gosh, you know what? I started thinking about meetings. Every meeting that I was in, I started, I thought back, okay, Brent was a follower. He was an opposer in this. And they can also be very contextual too.
Sure, yeah.
And I think that's one of those things that when you look at it, it's going to depend on the individuals. But to your point, an opposer that is converted to a follower can end up being one of your biggest advocates that you've ever had. That's the thing that's really, that I've experienced where you've got doubts about the project, however, whatever we're working on. But once you buy in, you have now gone through a vetting process of your own, and now you are highly, highly, motivated. Now, there's going to be some outliers that are just, I'll say those people that are just like to, be difficult.
Oppositional defiance.
It's I can't say that I haven't been that at times, but if you look at a bell curve and at the beginning you have say that you're a new leader, you go in and you've got 20% of people that are going to follow. They just go, it seems like a great person. I'm going to follow that. You've got this middle road, which is probably these, they're bystanders, maybe slightly resistant, and then at the other end you've got the opposers. The first goal, I think, is really to get that middle group, the bystanders, to become followers. And that's, I'll say, probably a little bit more the low-hanging fruit. But eventually you want to diminish this group of opposers and move them over. But that's when I talk about moving people.
Yeah.
That's what you want to be able to do. It's move them into the alignment, get them to buy in, whatever however you want to characterize that.
I've looked into, and this is a whole nother story, parenting kids from trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of starts off like, hey, all my parenting stuff doesn't work anymore. But when you dive into it, there's this, and you start to realize there's this much more narrow methods of parenting that work with kids from hard places.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that you have to parent them differently. It's often that people who haven't experienced trauma are more tolerant of less good parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my words are gone right now, right? But we'll keep it simple. And it's not that we parent or lead these people differently than we lead these. It's the way that we have to lead difficult or opposers ends up being the good and right way to lead everybody. Because if somebody just follows, sure, I'll go wherever, it's kind of a shallow following. They're more like a flapping wind, and they're not the ones that you can lean on sometimes.
Yeah.
You surround yourself with yes people. They haven't tested. And in the first episode, we talked about one of your models, the cut model: know, understand, and trust.
Right.
And so to get an opposer to come along and become a follower, you've really had to go through this know, understand, trust maybe a few times, right? Because I'm not going to follow you if I don't trust it. And maybe the others, it's maybe something equally as broken. If sure, I don't care if I just trust you too easily,
mm-hmm.
and I haven't known or understood, so I'm actually not going to be a strong member of the team.
You're not going to be effective.
Effective.
Yeah.
Because I really haven't understood or gone through things. But the opposers can drive us to some great leadership behaviors. I need to hear you. I need to understand you. Well, I need to hear and understand everybody.
Right.
And because it's not just how many people have I gotten to be followers. It's how many. Because that's not what we need to lead in our organization. We need strong, capable. Because you talked about, I need competent. I need capable.
Yep.
People at the front end. And if I've gone through the work of getting an opposer into alignment to know and understand the plan and the model, they've now grown very competent and capable onto the team.
And so have you.
And so have I.
Yeah. And your analogy, I think, is really good. The first thing that popped in my head is your most difficult child makes you the better parent.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things, and I believe in reframing things. Many times you talk to somebody, oh my gosh, I've got to talk to Joe. Oh, Joe's just so difficult to deal with. I just don't even want to talk to him. And I do some executive coaching on top of the other things, and I always tell people you want to reframe this. Sometimes people become the project, and you break it down into chunks, right? And so if somebody is difficult, it might be something as simple as I'm going to get them to smile. They just have that grumpy look on their face. Okay, that's my first little nugget, but it becomes a progression. And because you're having to hone your skills, whether it be communication, how you're presenting the data, whatever it is, you become better, and you also end up having this opposer. There's a halo effect, I think, that if you say, look, Joe is this difficult guy, he's not happy with anybody, but Brent swayed him over. Brent's a really great leader, or he's a great peer, however you describe it. And so I think that's it. But it goes back to that tension between the existing structure and that thing. You got to feel comfortable in there, and if you're not, it's just not. You're not going to be effective. I'm not going to say that you're going out of business, but you're not going to be at the spot you want to be at. And there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be really happy. I just want to sit here and do my job, but I'm not that person, and I think it'll be harder for those people as the economy changes. All these things that we talk about, AI, all those things. The ability to come out of your existing box is really important.
Yeah, that's good. We've hit a a bunch of great topics and really great takeaways. I want to switch gears, because we had a conversation a couple weeks ago, and you said something really interesting about legacy, and it made me, I didn't listen to a whole bunch of stuff because what you said challenged me.
A lot of people don't listen to me, Brent. I'm used to it.
That's right. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, exactly.
There's definitely some cognitive dissonance as you said, something challenging, and I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit because I think it'd be really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think so. Ask the question. I'll answer it. Ask it. Ask the question.
Ask the question.
Yeah.
Legacy often is seen as very, very important, and it's seen as a driving factor. That may or may not be the case. Talk to us a little bit about why a leader or an individual may or may not want to pursue legacy as a big life goal.
I don't believe in that. I don't believe in pursuing legacy.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
And you asked me why, and
yeah.
I thought about this a long time ago, and I've written. I love history, so you read a lot about leaders, and with some exceptions, the best leaders, the best people, the people that you aspire to be, never thought about legacy. What they did, and it goes back to what you do every day. If you do the right things every day, and you do them consistently, and thinking critically, acting virtuously, you will leave a legacy. I mean, probably one of the best examples and we've seen this. Pat Smith, teacher at XYZ High School for 32 years, passed away, and there's 10,000 kids. They never thought about doing a legacy. They may have thought, hey, hopefully these kids are going to go off and do things, but they never said, I'm going to have all these people at my funeral, or I'm going to be honored with this and all that. And I think the reason that I don't believe in it is one, when I find myself, when I focused inwardly, and I think focusing on leaving a legacy, not always, but many times makes us focus on ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we generally
my reputation, my
reputation, how am I going to be perceived? I'm not going to do the right thing because this is going to make politicians and politics. There's a lot of that. But if you think about it just at a very human level, is that we make our poorest decisions when we focus inwardly. We make our best when we focus outwardly. And I that to me, like I said, I try to keep things very simple. I think that's the main thing. And because a lot of people talk, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to leave this behind, and all those things. Some of it sounds outwardly that they're trying to do good, but when you look at a lot of the decisions,
it's really their own ego.
Exactly. And so I think that if we focus on what we do minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, right, those little decisions have the biggest impact on us. And that to me is one of the mantras is, do the right thing every time. Those decisions become habits. Those habits shape your character. Your character shapes your life. You do that, you will have a legacy. Now, maybe just with your family, maybe in the community, whatever it is. So I just don't believe in it for most people. There are some people that have done a great job of balancing it, but we're human beings, and we tend to look at inward versus outward.
That's good. And in the context of our the previous episode and today, I think to sum that up is leading ourselves well. If we've created the right framework and model for us, mm-hmm. that represents our deepest beliefs, our deepest values, noblest outward facing, those things, then can help create for us. If we don't lead ourselves well, we will fail to now convert that into what are the simple frameworks that will help me make decisions today, mm-hmm. that will continue to be outward focusing and not inward. Because I may have these noble goals or noble vision or plans, but if I haven't converted those into the simple things that will keep me making decisions in the moment by moment, towards those things, I'm going to tend to focus inward because I'm naturally going to pursue things like comfort or what's in it for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Comfort is creeping in all around us, and we have more comfort now than ever. No, I think you're right. I think if you're going to do inward, if you're going to focus inwardly, it's for self-improvement.
Yes, right.
And there's appropriate thing to do, and being very honest with yourself. The ego is, comfort and ego are all around us, and it creeps in all the time. And it's a battle that we never win, but hopefully we don't lose, to either one. But yeah, I think it's important that, as you think about what you're going to be doing out in the world, and I go back to think critically, act virtuously.
Yeah.
Did I do all the right things when I talked to Brent? He came to me with a problem. Did I, those are things that we have to do some self-examination, but not for, trying to make ourselves look better, but how do we improve? And I think that's the goal. And it's hard for people. I think some people that have had huge failures have had that realization that, I wasn't that box of chocolates that I thought I was. And I've got.
You were that one with the weird cherry and in the middle of it.
The one that nobody wanted.
I want to put
the only one
back.
That you only ate that when it was in the dark. You couldn't tell what it was. But I think that's the battle. Just as human beings, we're always battling that. That's so it's we're work in progress, never finished.
Think critically.
Act virtuously.
I want to thank you for joining us on a leader's journey today. Really enjoyed having Mike Morehouse with us, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel.